little bloodsuckers, to
What to watch now?
where we talk about what's streaming on Netflix right now. And in today's episode, while I'm sure you are currently catching up on the latest season of Supernatural, season 14 that just came out on Netflix today, I will be jogging your memory about the good old days with Supernatural season 1, episode 20, Dead Man's Blood. Ooh. The ending theme song for this particular episode is especially important to my boyfriend and me because we love Supernatural for a layered variety of reasons. I always talk about how I love Supernatural for the good, the bad, the corny, all of it. And there's a particular theme song they've played multiple times throughout the series, or something of this vibe. It's like this hardcore little short clip vibe. And whenever it comes up, I don't know why, but we are compelled to look at each other and just go, Sam and Dean, they are so mad. Sam and Dean, they are very sad. And this goes on and on and on. So when I heard this, I was like, it jogged my memory and I was like, oh yeah, we do this all the fucking time. Like, our songs go on very long with each other. So, that being said, I just wanted to say how much I loved rehearing that. But before anything, I just wanted to give you a quick reminder that you should totally subscribe to this podcast and tell a friend, tweet about it. I love fucking talking about this shit, and I would love this podcast to grow, and that would be very helpful. It would just take you but a moment, and I would so appreciate it. And if you were interested, please become a Patreon supporter today. I actually have a really cool mystery cipher I've been posting and some secret episodes. So if you're into this type of like mystery and occulty type shit, check out the Patreon for like $1. You can get some free content and help the podcast out. So it's a win-win for everybody. But either way, let's start off the episode with Mr. Elkins, which already to me feels like a Mr. Jenkins name from Scooby-Doo. Like, part of me was anticipating someone was going to take off his mask. But no, he was innocently hanging out in a bar, being judged, may I add, to have... Why can't you hang out and have a drink by yourself? Like, why is that so fucking blasphemous? Anyways, he's out by himself, having a drink, bullet journaling his, fears and dreams and hopes, while basically the bartender is over, just like kind of talking and expressing about him from a distance. And again, I keep noting this, but I love that they keep reminding us what it's like to be a hunter. Because in Supernatural, we are viewing it from the hunter standpoint. And may I add, a particularly sexy pair of hunters, because everyone else looks beat the fuck up, weird looking. They are not getting lucky anytime soon. Well, Sam and Dean are like in the prime of their youth and just also happen to be very sexy. So it's just a reminder of like how hard their life is, and that like hunters do whatever they can for other people to not take on this lifestyle. That's a huge... I mean, pretty much every hunter has gotten into this because something traumatic has happened to them, and they want to not only stop all evil, but they don't want anyone to turn out like them. It's a very self-hating, weird, heroic job, which is so weird, because like I don't feel like Captain America's self-hating. Or maybe he is, I don't know him personally. So Mr. Elkin is journaling in a classic hunter journaling type way until he sees some people... Very sleek, a little too clean for the bar. Got their little eyeliner, boys and girls, guy liner too. And he gets the fuck out of there until he's unfortunately hunted down by these same people who attack him in some way and steal a gun from him. Now, what's so great about Supernatural, like I mentioned before, the good, the bad, the corny, the thing is, they do not make certain mistakes that other shows do. So... they feel the rest of their content is strong enough, and it is, to not have to force something in your face. They trust you're going to stay around long enough to then understand the deeper meaning of something. So this gun is going to become extremely important in Supernatural's overall lore, but there's no long panning in shot, there's no focus in, it's not so in your face is what I'm trying to say. And they steal this gun, and they get out of there. Then we go to Sam and Dean, who are hanging out. They're trying to figure out, what case should they do next. And they end up coming upon a name of a man who was attacked by what seemed like an animal. But there was no evidence of an animal, like, paw prints or anything like that. And there was even some sort of a robbery. And this like I always say before, it's really interesting how they pick up their cases, because sometimes they just pick them at random. And other times there's more of kind of like a meaning. Because for other hunters at this point in Supernatural, they just pick cases whether they are like, okay, so Mr. Elkins particularly hunted these creatures, but a lot of hunters are more varied with what they pick. But at the end of the day, they just pick it at random, help who they can help. While Sam and Dean are learning that for their particular story, especially with Sam and the yellow-eyed demon, there is something like bigger afoot. There's some deeper meaning going on, and they look for those serendipities a little more, which is kind of interesting because I would say at heart at this point, Dean doesn't really believe in that type of shit, but in a way he does clearly because he's looking for it. So when Sam mentions the name of it, he recognizes it from the infamous John Winchester journal, which, this is a side note, I'm just proposing this idea. How would you guys feel if, like, I'm kind of doing a mock John Winchester journaling thing for the Patreon? That's not the Mystery Cipher, that's an addition to the Mystery Cipher. Like I said, a bunch of cool ass content on Patreon. But I was wondering, would you guys be interested if we had, like, a fun kind of mock journaling party? We could do it through a live stream with Twitter or something like that. I thought it'd be really fun if we kind of shared ideas, and it could be anything from like just a fake journal entry about fake cryptids, or it could be kind of a mix of like maybe it's in the style of John Winchester journaling type shit, and in reality, you're just writing your classes and whatever your goals are. You know what I mean? If you're interested in that, I think that'd be so fun if we did that together. Like I said, I really love Supernatural, and I love talking about it with you guys. So please hit me up on Twitter and tell me what you think about that. So anyways, they're going to go take care of this because they noticed the name. And when they go check out his house, they see it's been roughed up. And because Dean has clearly read, like, every Hardy Boys cover back and forth, or maybe even Nancy Drew, let's be real, she was a little more of a classic in practical scientific deduction. He puts some charcoal against the wood floor. He notices something a little bit different and sees a code that they figure is a post office box. When they get to the post office box, they get a letter. So we're getting kind of like an inkling. But Supernatural has a great formula, kind of like Murder, She Wrote and other of these classic shows that you love, and you don't care if it's repetitive, you enjoy yourself. And they just totally went, BAM! And took you out of it when all of a sudden John Winchester pops up. And I will just keep saying this, but my fucking God, worst dad of the year. And I think what's so hard about it is he just is so, like, he's so many things. First of all, from an outside perspective, as a female who's not related to him, so sexy. He's a very sexy man. For someone who's so beaten up, he's an older gentleman. God damn, is he sexy. So he's sexy. That's one distraction. Two, as a dad, he really feels heartfelt when he says things to you. So when he tells you, like, he can't see you, you take it seriously, because while he can be stern, there's a lot of, like, earnestness to him. I definitely think that both Sam and Dean, especially Sam, get that from him. Like, it feels like he's telling the truth. He's not a master manipulator. He just really means, like, so he could have all this background that's pissed you off and in a second convince you through his, like, heart and way of delivering his message. But it's this up and down road, because remember, not that long ago, they didn't know what was happening to him. I'm gonna just keep reminding you guys this. They didn't know what was happening to him. He pops up. They find, okay, he's okay. There's a little bit of a mystery why he isn't. Then, when they do finally kind of unwrap a little bit of the truth, they make the strong decision to be like, okay, it's wise. We should part from each other because it's not safe for either one of us. But as time goes on, they're starting to see kind of like, it's kind of like similar, and I only say this because John's so sexy. I feel like it's similar to when a guy is like, I'm going to call you, I'm just really busy. And you're like, yeah, he's totally busy. He's doing X, Y, and Z. And then after a while, maybe you see that he's hanging out with other people, and you start to be like, wait a minute. Have I been played? It's kind of like John Winchester's playing his own kids. Don't make that dirty, by the way. They are technically related. So he ends up popping in and saying that he knows Elkins and that it really upsets him. And I just live for how much attitude Sam has for him. Not just because it's entertaining, but Sam asks the questions I'm asking. Like, Dean's just so excited to, like, loves his dad, wants to make sure he's okay, he's very focused on the job at hand, but Sam is able to read between the lines and no longer feels like he has to do what his dad says. I mean, clearly he's been fighting with him his whole life, but especially as, like, a young adult, like, he is an adult. He can disagree with his dad and have an educated discussion, and his dad's still pulling the whole "I told you so" or "because I said so" line. And he points out, like, so he says, why haven't we heard about him? Or you showed up for this guy? John explains that they were really close, but they had some sort of falling out, and that, like, clearly he's very beaten up that his friend was murdered. So he kind of distracts you with this, like, I'm grieving for my friend. But what Sam's trying to get at is, like, you son of a bitch, we were looking for you for a very long time. We almost died multiple times, and we could not get a hold of you. Your own fucking flesh and blood. And here's this guy we've never heard of, and you show up in a fucking second? What the fuck, Dad? Like, and in addition to that, we've never heard about him. You're telling me you're so close to him, but we've never heard about him. And we don't really get to know about that relationship deeper. To be honest with you, when you're in that weird type of, it's almost like a war. Like, you know, soldiers sometimes feel a camaraderie even if they've never been together, or if they were in a particular trench, and it doesn't matter what their difference in personalities are. It's an experience they both share. It's like maybe those hunters at one point were hunting together, and emotionally that bonded them together. So yeah, there isn't something more deep to put in. It's a certain type of intangible experience for others unless you were there. So he quickly gets over his grieving quickly, again, where John Winchester can be way too tunnel visioned and kind of sociopathic in a way. As soon as he hears about a gun and that it wasn't there, he gets laser focused on this. And even Dean's, like, looking over and kind of starting to make this connection of, like, wow, you got over that grieving real quick, Dad. And they end up, goes, we're going to go hunt vampires. And this is, like, important because I've said this time and time again as someone who's watched Supernatural and has a lot of experience watching in just general occulty supernatural type shows. You never know what the rules are in each world. And in this world, vampires, to their knowledge, are not a thing. I kind of get the vibe from Sam and Dean that vampires might have, to their knowledge, never existed, truly been a myth. But it is, John basically explains that he thought they had all been hunted out and were just non-existent or extinct for that reason. But it turns out they're not. There's a pack, and they took out Mr. Elkins, which is how that's who they need to take down. And they specifically want to go after these vampires, and this is important, this really says a lot about John, not for the revenge of their friend, because that would be something Dean would especially understand, but because he wants this gun back. And it already, like, for once you can start to see Dean not just blanketly listen to everything his dad says. He's starting to think and question. I'm just looking at my notes to make sure. Oh, then we get to learn about vampires, and we see them steal, and how they hunt and how they steal a couple to kind of eat upon. Now, this is what's really funny about vampires, and I'm really curious to know what you think. In this world, vampires, they don't die from sunlight, crosses, the bloodthirsting Israel, and they can only be killed through decapitation, which makes sense. It's like the most absolute way of being separated from your body. Now, you gotta go into, like, cliches. Why do vampires always wear, like, leather jackets and want to be bad? And in this particular case, these are some pervy vampires who want to have sex in front of their corpse. I guess you could say there's the disrespect of them thinking nothing of humanity, but man, I don't even want to do it in front of, like, my cats. Like, these, I can't tell if they're kinky or they're just another level of weird. And I want to know what you think, why that is. Like, I'm going to pretend and view it from, like, not just a cliche sense of, like, vampires are bad kids. Part of me thinks all of their drinking, their tough guy attitude is because they're thinking, okay, their whole life they're told to be X, Y, and Z, and now there's kind of no rules holding them back. They can kill anybody who disagrees with them. And when some people who get finally let loose from this idea, they want to go hardcore. They just want to live that ultimate freedom. And that's those things they felt inhibited by. I think of Jessica from True Blood when she went from like the sweetsy little pastor daughter type, overly religious, naive girl to wanting to be like a little crazy badass. It makes sense to have that opposing idea. But that made sense for her particular story. Why is it that every vampire in this world is like, you've joined our gang, you've got your fangs, here's your leather jacket, dye your hair a dark maroon, here's your eyeliner. I'm a boy. Doesn't matter, you gotta wear eyeliner. Anyways, so John basically leads the hunt, and it is not going great. It is a lot of back and forth bickering between the boys. He even very coldly makes a comment about Dean and how Dean takes care of Baby, and Dean seems so humiliated because he loves Baby. This is his car. And by the way, I'm just like, Dean, why didn't you fucking stand up for yourself? I think he was just caught off guard. And also, John, how is this making you bond with your kids? Remember how much you love them and you're missing and you're going through all this effort so they don't die? And during this time, Dean still kind of stands up for his dad a little bit, trying to believe that he's making these decisions for the right thing. But I think he's more bothered by being the middle kid. I imagine he was there when his parents fought. He was there when his brother and dad fought. And unable to, at this very moment, connect that the same thing that's in both of these fights is the dad, and realizing that common factor. He's just, tired of being that middleman, and I don't blame him for that reason. But I don't disagree with Sam. This is, by the way, when Jared Padalecki, remember how I was making a joke that in the very beginning he seemed very, voguey and very, it was kind of goofy. Well, this is where his acting continues to just go that next level, and he's really, finding himself in the character, and just, some of the yelling is so fucking good in this. I love it. And he makes a good point saying, why are we just doing everything he says? There's no discussion, there's no team base. He can't talk to us that way anymore, and he's not coming from a point of view of just being we're not kids anymore, don't talk to us that way. It's I'm an adult, respect me, and wouldn't it make the best sense, wouldn't we do a better job of fighting if we discussed this, if we came up with a team plan together? If you were working with anyone else and you spoke to them that way, I'm sure they would not want to work with you, which we don't know. Does John Winchester talk to other people like that? Do other people not want to work with him? We don't really know at this point his other experience. The only other people we know who knew him are fucking dead. Anyways, so they go in initially, and I forgot to mention real quickly, I just want to mention that they have a fight, little John and Sam Winchester fight, where they mention, and this is where John keeps going back and forth with this idea of being you left me, but then privately he clearly was proud of his kid for going to college. He's a mess, and he's taking his kids down the whole therapy trail with him. So they end up essentially getting in there the first time and saving a mass amount of the humans they kind of had trapped in a little pin. But they didn't save everyone, because one of the humans actually got turned into a vampire, which is really interesting. And they're aware that they didn't get all of the vampires, but apparently a thing with being a vampire is they get your scent for life. So, which, by the way, again, another one of those moments where I'm John Winchester, I'm so you want to keep your kids safe, but you sign them up without telling them that their scent is going to be, these vampires are going to have their scent forever. I'm really fucking confused. Do you hear the logic of the way you go about parenting? Oh, damn sexy John Winchester. And in between them making that final call to get the rest of the vampires, we learn finally why John Winchester is so obsessed with this gun. So first of all, it's a beautiful looking gun. I'm not into guns personally, but from just an artistic standpoint, it's a well-made, beautiful looking piece of art. And this item, this Colt, was made in 1835 when Halley's Comet was over the sky, and it was the day of the Alamo or something. And Samuel Colt, the gentleman who made it, that's why it's called the Colt, he put little pentagrams on bullets, and he made this special gun. I would love to know how he made it or what witchcraft he was into, but apparently this gun can literally kill anyone or anything. And that's huge, because Even when the boys battle ghosts, they can only use really rock salt to kind of dissipate it. All they can really do is burn the bones. But when it starts to get into cryptids like, Sasquatch, the Rake, I wonder if they've ever fought any hide-behinds. If you're actually interested in that, I just did an episode of my other podcast, Mystery Storytime, about the hide-behinds. So fucking scary and creepy. Slenderman is definitely inspired by the hide-behinds. Anyways, so to have something that truly executes them would be changing everything, because these boys only know how to work with guns, machetes, so on and so forth. And he wants this gun because this gun could be the very thing that takes out the yellow-eyed demon. Because again, they don't really have anything to take down these creatures at this point in time. That's why, like, if a demon's involved, the most they can do is, like, just get out of there. I think at this point they don't even have exorcisms, if I can, or do they? I can't remember, but it's pretty fucking bad. They end up, their dad ends up having another heart-to-heart. I'm trying to get to the end point, don't worry. But he ends up having another end point conversation with Sam. So one moment he's biting his head off and freaking out on him. And then the next, he's telling a story about when he was a little kid. Every year for his birthday, he would put $100 in a big savings account, hoping to save for him to go to college. Which I'm just like, again, why have we not told this story before? Like, have you just blacked out in between? He keep mentioning and using the excuse that his wife died, and I fucking get that. That's a very tragic experience, but unfortunately, he's a poster child of what happens if you let your grief and your anger consume you. It's gotten to the point that, like, I kind of feel like he's almost blacking out in between just him living life and dissociating, dealing with all this trauma he's never gotten over, again, understandably, that he can't even take moments to check in and be like, let me tell you this vital information that maybe helps you see my perspective or understand that I really have always supported you. I'm not lying or this is why I'm nothing. He just won't communicate. And to a certain degree, you can blame the grief and blame this trauma that happened to him, but Sam and Dean went through it too. And I think that he uses it as a crutch and an excuse to not change someone who's so stubborn and hard-headed. And that's really honestly the problem at the end of the day, because I feel like he's stubborn and hard-headed, and if the stakes were less high, it would just be like, oh, he can be an asshole, but we love him, he's our dad. But because of the situations, again, he puts them through with the whole vampires having their scent for life and almost getting the boys killed multiple times and letting them worry and so on and so forth, it just honestly, you can't make excuses anymore for him. So he talks about his excuse too is just that all he saw was evil and he wanted to protect his son. But again, everything we just talked about. So ultimately, he ends up getting in a fight, surprisingly, with Dean. He explains that he is going to take the vampire female he stole with Dead Man's Blood, and he's going to go negotiate for the cult. He's going to give him their vampire back, and then he's going to get the cult. Because again, he's just so tunnel visioned. He is obsessed. He must get that cult. There's nothing else he can get. And this is when finally, Jesus Christ, it's like we've been edging now for 20 episodes before Dean finally tells his dad to fuck off. And his dad makes the point, or Dean basically calls him out for being really reckless, that this isn't if we're being pragmatic, this isn't the way you go about hunting and fighting. You would do it as a team, it would be a discussion, and this doesn't make any sense that you would put yourself in danger, because realistically, if you give the vampire over, they're going to have the advantage. All of this shit is so stupid. You won't consult with us. You're being an asshole. You're making the same moves over and over again and expecting different results. And honestly, the biggest point that he makes is what happens if you die. So it's okay for you to be reckless and you to die. And he's not saying from a standpoint of, like, again, that whole immature child thing, like, I want to be reckless and what if I want to die too? It's the idea that, okay, so there is the hero's choice to end up sacrificing yourself to save others, but I feel like it's more heroic if you actually want to live. Not only is John probably at this point decently suicidal, again, from all the trauma he's experienced, but of course he's more okay with dying. He gets the potential to go see his wife again, while the kids are aware of being like, yeah, but you're going to leave us in the way that when our mom did, we forever think about her, and you know what it's like to be on the other end of the person that outlives the other person that passes away. And so you're saying it's okay if we go through that trauma, but not you. That's what you're more concerned with. He finally is starting to see the underlying motivation. It's kind of interesting too, because if you were to listen to this podcast without actually seeing the series, John Winchester sounds like a fucking monster. But what makes him so fun and compelling to watch is like he really sucks you in. I just actually reviewed like literally today, and you should totally check it out. It's called Dead to Me. And the one character, Judy, her actions are not good, but she's so sweet and genuine, and she's not trying to be manipulative. Again, she's very upfront that if you experience it, it makes you view her in a way that you would never view anyone else if they did the same exact things. John, it has a way of having that effect on even the viewer, let alone his own kids. But finally, that, hazy, hypnotizing effect doesn't work on Dean anymore. He's finally starting to realize, because I think the biggest thing too is like and this is the last thing I'll say about their whole relationship. So Dean for a couple years has been just with his dad, and then for a time by himself now. So when he got Sam, it's the first time in their entire relationship as brothers, as family, where that middleman factor, that dad that caused tension, that the stuff that made Dean overprotective and kind of angry towards Sam is gone. And when he's just with his brother and they're finally left alone all the time, they work really well together. Even with their bickering, they make great choices, they pick great cases, they care about each other. I don't think Dean's ever had that. Like, he knows his dad cares, he says that, but he really feels it from Sam. Sam does whatever he can, it's like the healthiest relationship he's had with another human being. I can't even say, like, because I obviously they're related, but I can't even say, like, emotionally, like, romantic, or even friendship or family, just, like, any relationship. So that's so important. You can see why he's finally starting to look around and go, you know what? I think I'm going to defend the person who's quicker to defend me than you are. Peace. So what ends up happening is John goes to make the negotiation, and he tries to get the gun, but the boys show up to give him backup without their permission. Now Sam gets grabbed by Luther, the vampire, which I thought was really interesting, that when his mate first stole the colt and killed the guy, and she was doing it in a loving way because his family was murdered by this guy, it's actually really sweet. Can you imagine taking vengeance for your loved ones, like, previous dead wife and kids? Like, that's like next level, both psychotic, but I get that's very selfless in a weird way. We're talking about morbid morals here. I do not condone that. So he makes a point of being like, no, these guys will hunt us down, we're almost extinct, you brought attention to us. And so Luther tries to kill Sam because he's like, you're never gonna fucking leave us alone. And it almost, in a weird way, makes you feel for him like a scared animal. But then you rewind back to him having sex in front of bleeding out humans and like all the creepy pervy stuff, and you're like, never mind, Luther. And John Winchester sacrifices one of the last valuable bullets. I think there's only like 6 left, and he kills Luther, scares the rest of the vampires, and they get the fuck out of there. And so ultimately we get to see the crazy goofy CGI power of the cult, which like puts things in perspective, and it's pretty fun and cool because this show is great with all its like talking and writing and emotions going on, but brass tacks, we love a good just straight up like ghoul or ghost or a culty type item. I love that shit. Again, if you love that shit, check out the Patreon. I'm totally going into that type of stuff. So anyways, they end up having like a heart to heart, and John Winchester, because somehow hell has frozen over, actually fucking admits that Dean was right. He made the right call showing up and protecting him. And that ultimately, that's what they needed to do. And it's kind of a like, I love you kids. And it's a bit of a warm moment between all of them. But I don't feel like this fixes anything. When you have wounds this deep, it was a nice moment, but it was not fucking enough. So, another great episode. Now we have a little more information. The cult exists, vampires exist, and Dean and Sam are that much closer, which, come on, let's be real. We're all watching it for that exact reason. If you enjoyed this podcast, please feel free to subscribe, like, tweet me, become a Patreon user today. And just remember, I love you in the most platonic way possible. Bye!